This week, the World Health Organization announced it will use the European Union's digital vaccine certification model as a global digital health certification network framework. Now, what this does is this brings the concept of a global vaccine passport much closer to reality. Now, the member nations of the World Health Organization, they just met, and they didn't vote on this. But that didn't stop these unelected bureaucrats at the WHO from moving forward with their power grab. Now, where could this lead? Well, I tell you, it could lead to a very bad outcome. Joining me now to discuss this is former Congresswoman Michele Bachmann. She has just returned, actually, from Geneva, where she attended the 76th World Health Assembly, where the WHO met. She served in Congress for 8 years, is now the dean of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University. During her time in Congress, she served on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Dean Bachmann, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Tony, good to see you too.
Now, you were recently in Geneva, as I mentioned, for the World Health Assembly, but this global health certification network was not voted on or announced. So what's this all about?
No, you're right. It was discussed prior to the meeting that we just had for 7 days in Geneva, but they did not vote on it. As a matter of fact, there were 307 amendments that were introduced to the international health rules together with the global pandemic treaty. The expectation is those two documents will be merged and synthesized, and 1 year from now, that will be either voted on or without dissent. It will just be adopted by the World Health Assembly. What does this mean? It means the creation of a platform that would envision all nations, all 194 member nations of the WHO, to yield their decision-making authority over healthcare to the WHO. That's profound. And so this didn't happen with the creation of the digital health certificate at the WHO. They just took it. And I was stunned, like you said. This is the most unbelievable power grab because, Tony, this digital certification will ultimately be used as the enforcement mechanism for this global control over all nations regarding healthcare and many other issues as well.
I mean, this will have the record, your health record, vaccine record of all vaccinations. And this is what we saw being, bounced around during COVID about a vaccine passport. This would be essentially, I guess it would be in your smartphone or device. You would have to have something like this in order to travel.
That's right. It's a global digital ID. Take a look at your cell phone. A QR code would be on this, only it's managed by the World Health Organization, the organization that tragically got it more wrong than any other nation during the global pandemic. But now they would be the ones who are in charge of administering this QR code, but they would also set the requirements that we have to meet, whether it's mandating vaccines, mandating boosters, mandating mask wearing, mandating lockdowns, mandating church closures. They would have the say on everything, and our cell phone would tell the story if we are in compliance or not. That's very similar to the social credit system that communist China uses and imposes on their own people. That's what this system envisions. And it's far more than just the vaccine. Ultimately, they envision a cashless society where our money would be converged. And as you said, it's a travel locator number that we have. We could not get on a plane or a public conveyance of any kind unless we are in conformity with what the WHO says.
Now, Michele, this is so far-reaching that it sounds like one of those conspiracy theories that you dig up off the internet somewhere. But this is literally happening. They announced it. I played a clip of Tedros saying this yesterday at the signing ceremony. They are doing this in the European Union. And as I understand it, this is establishing the framework that then can go global.
That's right. And realize this covers 80 nations. And they also said that the initiation date is June of 2023. That's now. So this global vaccine passport is already live. It's already being administered by the WHO, and it already impacts 80 European nations who are in this net. We know from the amendments to the International Health Rules and the Global Pandemic Treaty that the WHO envisions that all 194 nations will be a part of this global vaccine passport, where they tell us what we have to do and they administer and they regulate our movements. This is tracking, tracing, surveillance virtually of every person on Earth, and it creates that platform for global governance, which has never happened before in history. So it's a very serious thing that they're doing. They didn't ask permission. They didn't get a vote. They just took the power. But here's the biggest question, Tony. The biggest question is, will the United States of America go into this system? And if so, when? And that's why I say it's time for U.S. senators to wake up and start asking questions, and members of the House. And they need to deliver the message in no uncertain terms to the Biden administration. The United States will not go into this system. United States-based corporations will not go into this system. And no customer of any business should ever be punished for not going into this system.
So we have been talking, in fact, you joined us from Geneva. We were talking about the WHO and the meeting in Geneva, leading up to it, during the meeting, about, as you talked about, the 307 amendments to their operating procedures, as well as the global protocol or treaty. So we'll call it what it is. It's a treaty. This like leapfrogs ahead of all of that and grabs this power. And it's almost as if you would think they would have brought this up and just said, hey, we're going to unveil this. This is how it works. They would have brought it up during the recent meeting in Geneva, but it's probably because they didn't want those countries not involved saying, whoa, wait a minute, we didn't sign up for this.
Oh, I think you're probably right, because, again, this is the enforcement mechanism. The global digital vaccine passport is the enforcement mechanism for this global governance platform that the WHO has. So this is as big as it gets, this QR code on your phone. You don't, as Tony had said, you don't move unless the WHO approves you moving. Nearly every aspect of your life will be recorded and surveilled through this system. So this is not a small thing. This will impact every American. This will impact our way of life, but it will impact virtually everyone on Earth. And for those who are watching, Tony, who know the Bible, who know what the prophets have said, and the convergence of events that we're seeing in this day, this has prophetic implications biblically for what we're seeing at the WHO. Certainly none of us want to be a part of advancing a global system. And this began with the Biden administration. The Biden administration is the lead at the WHO.
Well, I want to just address that for a moment to make sure people are hearing us clearly. I do think this does fit with a pattern that we see in biblical prophecy. But that does not mean that we step aside and let it move forward. I believe that a lot of the biblical prophecy is fulfilled because God's people are not doing what they should do, and evil can run its course. Now, we know those things will eventually happen, but it doesn't have to happen on our watch. We can do our very best and should to stop this. Now, again, going into the meeting in Geneva, we were talking with members of Congress about pulling out of the WHO just because of the treaty. Now we have even more reason for members of Congress to act and get us out.
Yes, that's right. The United States of America should pull out of the World Health Organization, and we should stop funding the World Health Organization. Nothing is hidden. Everything is exposed. Anyone in your audience can go to who.int, click on the 76th World Health Assembly. You can read all of the amendments. You can read the Global Pandemic Treaty. You can even watch all of the sessions. They're archived where they talk about this. They're very clear about what they're going to do. But what's interesting is there were no members of Congress in attendance at the World Health Assembly. They should have been there. But I didn't see the American Press Corps there. Tony, your show was unique. We did a live broadcast from Geneva, but there were virtually no American outlets doing any reporting on site from an event and decisions that will be so consequential, they will literally impact every human on Earth.
So now, folks, is the time to act. And this is actually one of the resources we have on the website, TonyPerkins.com. If you go to TonyPerkins.com, episode resources, the second one down is to urge Congress to withhold funding from the WHO and to get us out. And this is something I think we've got to begin pushing hard and demanding, because this is coming down the track very rapidly. And once it's in place, I think it's very difficult to undo what they will do.
Once you give away sovereignty, it's almost impossible to give back. And let's realize a press conference was held on Monday telling us that this exists, the digital global passport, and that 80 countries are already in it. So conceivably next week, we could hear a press report that President Biden put the United States in this global digital passport. How do we get out? By that point, members of Congress, I think, will be in panic mode. They need to start ringing the doorbell, the front bell at the White House, and say, President Biden, we have to sit down. We have to have a talk. You need to know that the people of America do not want to come under the control of the enforceability of the World Health Organization. They don't want to ask the WHO for permission to get on a plane. And they certainly don't want to be told that they are forced to take a vaccine or a booster or wear a mask or whatever it is that the WHO comes up with and tells them they have to do.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking with one of the leaders of the parental rights groups that has been labeled by the SPLC as a hate group now because they've been resisting what's happening in education and the indoctrination of their children and the forced closures and the mask wearing and the vaccines that was really being pushed by the WHO. So if you didn't like what you saw in COVID, you're not going to like what the WHO has up their sleeve next. Now is the time to act. And if you can't get to the website, you can text WHO to 67742. That's WHO to 67742. You'll get a link to urge Congress to address this issue. All right, Michele, we only have about 2 minutes left. This was a surprise that didn't happen at the World Health Assembly. It happened yesterday. But I want to go back to the Assembly. You were there in Geneva. What else can you tell you that surprised you about your time there at the World Health Assembly?
What surprised me more than anything, Tony, is the fact that there wasn't one nation that disagreed with what was being said. The individual in charge with passing the 307 amendments is an official from Saudi Arabia. His name is Dr. Abdullah Asiri. And he said quite plainly that we can't have the old rules for the next pandemic. We have to have new rules, and those rules have to restrict people's liberties. We have to have control over the means of production, over healthcare products and vaccines. What he talked about was enhanced levels of powers and control that would literally deny to the average American our Bill of Rights protections and our constitutional rights. This was absolutely shocking to hear this. And there wasn't one nation, Tony, not one, that disagreed with what was being said about either the amendments, global pandemic treaty. So this is a done deal. That's what's tragic. Yeah. This is a done deal unless someone stands up and disagrees. And I think most people on Earth have no idea what's about to happen.
You know, and Michele, this is why we have no business being in these global entities, because this is going to upset people on the left, but we're unique. We have a Bill of Rights. We understand the value of the individual and the God-given rights that we have. They don't come to us from government. They're granted to us, they're given to us by God to be protected by government. That's what makes us different. And that's what these other governments don't have. And that's why their people don't have freedom. And we're willing to fight for that freedom. Michele Bachmann, always great to see you. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today.
Thanks, Tony.